Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Love and Bananas discussion with Ashley Bell and Danielle Carnahan. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I'm Dr. Chris Whittier. I'm a proud alumnus of Tufts University, or Jumbo as we like to call ourselves, which I'll get to a little bit more of in a second. I've been a professor here at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine for about 7 years. My main role is that I direct the Masters in Conservation Medicine program, or the MCM program as we affectionately call it. And that's part of the reason that I know Danielle, who I'll introduce in a second. My professional interests really are in the whole area of infectious diseases of wildlife, in particular focus on diseases of humans that can be transmitted to other animals. Did my PhD work working with mountain gorillas and with the project that's now known as the Gorilla Doctors. And I've continued some work with gorillas, consulting and doing emergency work for partners like the World Wildlife Fund. Before I came to Tufts, I was at Smithsonian, where I worked for another Tufts alum, who's the director of the head veterinarian at the National Zoo, working on mostly a USAID project, Emerging Pandemic Threats Project, which is very timely considering what we're all experiencing right now. And that project actually led me to have some experiences in Asia as well as Africa. So I feel a close connection to a lot of things that are going on in the movie. But you didn't come here to hear about me, so I want to get to tonight's program. Hopefully don't need to tell most of the audience that Tufts reserves a really special place for elephants as really extraordinary animals. Globally, elephants are really important keystone species that have a really important role in their environment, maintaining biodiversity and maintaining health in those environments. And locally, the elephants really embody the spirit of Tufts University. And it's not just because of our very well-known connection to the famous circus elephant Jumbo, from whom we draw our name for our students and sports teams and alumni. So tonight, I'm thrilled to moderate conversation between two exceptional women that are both seeking to bring light to the perils of Asian elephants and the things that they're facing in captivity, as well as some of those problems translate to the wild. And we're going to talk tonight about things that we can all do to do our part to help make sure that elephants are protected, respected, and ultimately conserved and saved from extinction. So the movie that we've all watched in preparation for tonight is Love and Bananas, an elephant story. This is Ashley Bell's first feature as a director, writer, and producer. The film had a nationwide theatrical release of over 125 theaters, and it had a 91st Academy Award documentary run and has a very strong 93% rating from Rotten Tomatoes. So Ashley is primarily known as an actress and recognizable for her critically acclaimed role in The Last Exorcism, garnering an Independent Spirit Award and an MTV Movie Award. She has cross genres, performing on Broadway and starring in films that have been staples at film festivals internationally. Earth Day Network awarded Ashley with the Women in Green Economy Leadership Award for her exceptional leadership and sustainability and being a role model for young women across the globe. Danielle Carnahan graduated from the MCM program here at the Cummings School in 2019, and she traveled to Boon Lats Elephant Sanctuary in Thailand for her externship that was the capstone project for the MCM program. She had spent time in Thailand previously, and so she was well aware and really already pretty passionate about the treatment of elephants in these rescue situations in sanctuaries in Southeast Asia, and also the impacts of tourism can have on how elephants are treated and brought into those situations. She did her capstone project looking at complex post-traumatic stress disorder in captive elephants in that sanctuary and trying to apply some tools to be able to look at that situation. So in addition to the research she completed while she was there, she has also written a lot about that experience and others in her personal blog that's called The Call to Conserve. She started her blog towards the end of her time here at Tufts and has continued to use that as a platform to spread awareness about topics within wildlife and environmental conservation in a way that's really easily digestible for the general public. This year, on top of her personal blog and writing, she's started to do some freelance work and is really looking forward to being able to get back to the field and traveling around the world to help do her part for conservation. So before we get started, a couple of housekeeping issues. So first, we're going to start by talking to Ashley a bit about the film, and then we'll learn about Danielle's work at Boon Lats Elephant Sanctuary. Then we're going to move into a joint conversation with the two of them. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Tufts Alumni YouTube channel. And you'll notice that your audio and video are disabled, but we would encourage you to participate. And so you can do that by putting questions in the Q&A, and we'll be looking at those and answering as many as we can in the time we've got today. So you should be able to see the Q&A chat feature at the bottom of your screen. So without further ado, I would like to get started. And I think, Ashley, the place that I would like to get started is by talking about Lek. And so I think in the movie you did a really terrific job of, not only introducing her, but I think really giving the audience a chance to really get to know her. And as I've told you before, I think it's excellent to really see the local people that are working on the ground and giving them credit and recognition for the really important conservation work that they do. So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how your connection with her kind of came about, and how that sort of developed. And in watching the film, I'm sort of struck by her sort of personality and charisma, and wondering if there was some point there was the sort of eureka moment that happened for you, that you thought, oh boy, this is such an amazing personality. I could really build this film around her.
Absolutely. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to Tufts University, Chris, Amanda, Mary, and Danielle. What an honor it is to be invited to speak. And thank you to everybody participating for spending your day, your evening, wherever you are in the world, learning about Asian elephants. It's really, really a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I was born and raised in an environmental family, and born and raised a vegetarian. So I was aware of these kind of eco superheroes, of which Lek definitely was one of them. So before I met her, I'd known of her work for about 10 years. And when I met her the first time in Cambodia, I was a bit starstruck, because she's such a rebel, and so fearless in the defense of animals. And that initial trip to Cambodia, I thought it was going to be this short film. And when we got there, it was a complete disaster. As you can see in the footage, the forest was on fire. It was being illegally logged and poached. The elephants were in horrific condition. And the sanctuary as a whole was under threat. But through it all, I saw Lek's spirit, and I saw the iPad footage she had taken of the convoy to get those 2 elephants at the Cambodia Wildlife Sanctuary. And she always carries around her iPad with her, because she needs to document if something goes awry. That's her proof. So she always has a camera on her because people, she's very well known out there, and she gets in any of these situations can be dangerous. So she documented these elephants crossing a river, going through a war zone, getting under a line, crossing a border before a curfew, finally arriving at the middle of the night at the Cambodia Wildlife Sanctuary. And I saw that footage on this iPad, and I was like, okay, whatever idea of a short film I had about, documenting what I saw on the day, this is the story that needs to be told. I've never seen anything more harrowing and more heroic and hopeful in the animal space. And at least from what I had seen. And that trip was initially kind of the point of that trip, which I learned after the fact, was a bonding, an establishment of trust with my team in Lek and me in Lek, and her saying, yeah, you can come with us on an elephant rescue. If you can hang, you can come. And I'm like, well, I'll figure out the hanging part, but I'm coming. And that began our relationship.
That's yeah, it's really, I mean, I think a lot of that the bond is really quite apparent, I think throughout the film. And it's I think she is a really sort of a dynamic personality. I know in the conversations since we've started planning for this event, you mentioned that she's now has a audience with the parliament in Thailand. And I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit about why that's so important, and how that might sort of potentially benefit the work that she's trying to do.
Absolutely. Up to the point, as you've seen in the film, has always been a clash between Lek and Lek's work with the government, especially in regards to animal rights, creating laws and bills to protect animal rights and establish that. And since the film came out, there was a period of time where things did get a bit dangerous, but Lek's respect has grown with her notoriety in Thailand. The king visited Elephant Nature Park, which was an incredible moment of grace and recognition, to almost protect her. And she now has a place working with Parliament, so that she's allowed in those rooms and is welcome and a part of those government conversations, that they're no longer blocking her from that, that she's working with the government for animal rights is, I know years ago was something she was very much working to achieve. So she now has their ear, and they're finally recognizing her for everything that she is worth. Before COVID hit, uh, because of the film, Lek was able to turn 19 trekking camps into humane sanctuaries where they were fully converted. And about 100 camps, they became ethical sanctuaries where they spend the day without chains, but at night those elephants are still chained up because it takes a lot to turn a trekking camp into a sanctuary. There needs to be a proper housing, everything needs to change. So they still do have a chain at night, but they aren't being ridden anymore. So that's a lot. That's a huge help to those elephants. Unfortunately, because of COVID, so much of the elephant business is tourism, and tourism has shut down. Lek is indomitable. Lek has, because, for her, it's all about taking care of the elephant. So no matter if they are a trekking camp or a humane sanctuary, Lek knows that owner, has been in communication with that owner to try to help those elephants. No tourism was coming in, and all of the owners that were even resistant to Lek's help said, help us, we have elephants, they need hundreds of pounds of food, we don't have any food to feed them. So Lek has been providing food, I believe, for 1,000 camps or 1,000 elephants all throughout Thailand. And additionally, she has provided jobs of planting food and plantations to grow elephant crops to employ former mahouts. Kind of a jewelry trade business to employ local women, that they can make artisan goods that can be then sold out of Thailand to bring in money, as well as just literally providing food for elephants all throughout Thailand, captive or in humane sanctuaries or in traditional sanctuaries.
Yeah, and I think it's an amazing, achievement on her part. And I think we often sort of forget about, the importance of that sort of tourism revenue for being able to, keep these sort of things going. So I'm wondering, on that note, as part of her ability to be able to find the resources to be able to provide food for all of those places, are there donations that are coming in to help support that? And is there any point at which these places can become self-sustainable?
I know for the majority, Lex, all of the monies that come into Elephant Nature Park were because of the volunteer work. She has not had any major donors backing her. It has been because of people come and want to spend a night, a day, a month, and work for the elephant. I know there's an organization that she works with in the United States called Trunks Up, which has really come into prominence, especially since COVID, where you can donate money to quote unquote sponsor an elephant or adopt an elephant and continue the progress with that elephant. I think the hope would be that these camps would have a change of heart through this time and become self-sustainable during this time. I only know kind of what Lek is constantly reporting back on her Facebook about steps that she's doing to try to show new opportunities to be in service of elephants.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder, I think, to all of us about the we sort of recognize a lot of the human suffering and lack of resources from tourism, but I think it's a good reminder about how that's impacting wildlife as well. So that's really valuable. I think to change gears a little bit, you the film makes it seem like you had the trip to Cambodia and the sort of inspiration, and then you were kind of waiting by the phone for the opportunity to partake of a rescue, and off you went and made the film, and so I wanted to give you the opportunity to say a little bit more about the hard work that obviously goes into doing a project like this. Because I think the story I think is really relevant and really important. But I think from those of us outside of the Hollywood realm, I think it's hard to think about what goes into making a movie like this. So can you tell us a little about that?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, it pretty much was that. I waited 2.5 years for a rescue to go on the rescue of Noi Na. And it was pretty much waiting by Facebook. Lek and I predominantly communicated over Facebook. And there were 2 other kind of false starts where I would get a message from Lek being like, there's an elephant, can you be here tonight? And I'm like at Whole Foods picking out a quinoa, being like, oh, do I go to Thailand now? And then, sadly, unfortunately, by the time I was able to try to make a decision or touch base with her again, she said it's called off. That elephant has been sold to a trekking camp, or that elephant has been exported to a circus. So there were those false starts because Asian elephants, there are so few left that they're bought. So you really have to move fast. Briefly, we had producers on board that said, well, we want to make sure the right elephant is being rescued for the film. And I was like, the right elephant? But any elephant is the right elephant because it's an elephant story. And that just goes right back to Lek and Lek's spirit. She sees everything with such compassion and just through that elephant's eyes. And Noi Na was the star of the show. So whatever elephant would be next, that would be our leading lady. And yeah, we were very open to that happening in Cambodia, but the fastest one we were able to go on was Noi Na in Thailand. And we had about a week to pull insurance, grab a crew together, get on flights and be there and hit the ground filming. And we shot 75 hours of footage, and it took about a year to edit it down to the final cut.
It's an amazing amount of work, and I think while we're on that topic, I have to ask. There's a moment in the movie when you're in the back of the truck, and I felt like there was a look on your face that was a little bit of, what am I doing here? And I'm wondering if that was the case, or if you could tell us a little bit about. I mean, I think it's clear that the plight of these elephants has really, it's really motivated you, and it's really obviously really affected you. But I'm wondering if you could sort of say a little bit about that, and if there were those sort of moments. I mean, I think that there's a lot of really emotionally powerful moments in the movie, I think, as well. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about both were there moments of what am I doing here, as well as those moments of, this is why I'm here, and this is, that were really rewarding.
Absolutely. I mean, yes, that moment was clear as day. I'm not a good liar, so that was pure fear. I'm a valley girl from the San Fernando Valley of Los Angeles, and there I was on a truck with an 8,000-pound elephant, and I said, "What have I gotten myself into? This is everything I thought about for 2 years, and now I'm here, and now I'm quite scared." But I mean, it was at that moment I looked over at Lek, and you can't not. I immediately put myself in her shoes because I'm there for that one ride of 24 hours. How many rides has Noi Na done her entire life, not knowing she was going to freedom? That was the ride for every elephant heading to a destination they're not certain of. And that day of that fear, and a fear that we wouldn't have gotten her, or fear, what if something got sketchy at the trekking camp, or which it did not, or what if or any one of the numbers of fears that Lek is constantly up against. That was a week of my life. That's every day for Lek Tyler. So it was an honor to be invited right under her wing and get that close to these animals. And with the whole team involved, myself and Change for Balance, the production company I did it with, and there was only three guys that went with me. It was our job to take this footage home and tell this story to the best of our ability.
I think hopefully the audience would agree that you did a fantastic job of doing that and telling that story. So
thank you for watching.
No, I've got have a lot more questions, and hopefully there's others coming in from the audience as well. I think we'll transition and talk to Danielle a little bit. So Danielle, I think a good starting point to potentially, I think, sort of set up the rest of the discussion is probably most of us in the audience are familiar with the term PTSD, but might scratch our heads a little bit about this idea of complex PTSD. So I'm wondering if you could sketch out a little bit for us why that term exists and sort of the differentiation between kind of regular PTSD versus complex PTSD.
Yeah, definitely. So there is research that's been done on PTSD in elephants, but PTSD is mostly characterized by a single incident. So there's been PTSD studies done on African elephants that have been affected by trauma after, for example, seeing members of their herd be poached or being translocated somewhere else. Whereas complex PTSD is usually long-term exposure to a trauma, and it's usually pretty early on in the individual's life. And this early on trauma basically causes undeveloped neural pathways to form, which is kind of how it continues on in the individual. One of the papers that I read when I was doing my research for my project was one of the authors gave a really good example of what complex PTSD looks like. And he had said that it's mostly caused by a victim's dependence on the person in power that makes them unable to exercise their autonomy. So a lot of Asian elephants in captivity have complex PTSD rather than PTSD because of the dominance-based training that they go through and the dominance-based management that they're under.
Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And I think if you sort of think about it as, from my veterinary standpoint, it's a bit of this sort of simplified acute versus chronic. And I think, it's very easy, and I think really well portrayed, or unfortunately portrayed in the movie, about the trauma that these elephants do go to. And so I think you sort of answered that question about about identifying it. Do you want to say a little bit more about that, about how, how going into, what are the signs that you might, recognize if you go to a sanctuary or a place to be able to recognize this in elephants?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the factors that I would use and look for as symptoms are things that a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think twice about if they saw it in an elephant. And part of the reason for that is because with complex PTSD, you have to look at the history of the animal, the source of the trauma, as well as the symptoms that they're presenting with. So a lot of the symptoms I would look for were things like distress vocalizations, an avoidance of socialization with other elephants, which, at a lot of places that have elephants, you would look at that and just say, oh, this elephant isn't very social. And that might be the case, but if you look at their background, you can kind of better identify if they've had trauma that's led to them not being social, or if that's more of a personality trait. A few other things that I looked at and saw were like self-harm behaviors. Elephants will self-harm. Any like tension reducing behaviors, a common ones that you would see that a lot of people may have seen like in zoos is elephants pacing. They'll bob their heads back and forth. They'll kind of sway their trunks. Anything that's really repetitive is usually a coping mechanism. Another thing that I saw a lot was any hypervigilance or kind of anxiety. And something that Ashley said was actually a great example. When elephants are in a truck, they have no idea where they're going. A lot of them are in trucks all the time throughout their lives, going to different trekking camps, going to different circuses. And one of the elephants that I was observing at Bless, whenever a truck drove by her, she would charge at it. And for someone who didn't know her history, that might just seem like, oh, she's excited because the food is coming, or, you know, the sound is too much for her. But that was a huge trigger for her, a huge stress trigger, because she was consistently being taken in trucks and relocated to different places. And she was constantly seeing elephants that she had connected with, her friends, her family, being taken on trucks and never seeing them again. So there are little things that you can identify in an elephant when you know their history that you may otherwise overlook.
Can you give us some examples of what self-harm looks like in an elephant?
Yeah, one of the examples that one of the elephants that was at Bless, or used to be at Bless, would do is she would take her trunk, like the tip of her trunk, and she would step on it, and she would continue stepping on it and kind of lifting her trunk up, and the skin would eventually come off. So she would kind of continue stepping on her trunk until all the skin came off, and then she would kind of flick it at people. So, you know, things like that. A lot of times it is with the trunk, because their trunks are so sensitive that a lot of times they'll use that as kind of a self-harm. They'll step on their trunks. That was the main symptom that I saw.
So I'm not sure if you can answer this without getting sort of giving us a sort of a tutorial on different management styles, but sort of recognizing that this is obviously a problem in a lot of these sanctuaries and camps where these elephants are because of their circumstances and how they've gotten there. What can you tell us about the sort of management styles and practices, and what can sort of be done to try to manage this or alleviate or improve the situation in these elephants?
One of the most important things to note is that there's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution, because elephants, just like us, are individuals. They've all undergone different trauma. And even two elephants that have been in the same camp, who are the same age, they're going to perceive their trauma differently, because they're individuals, they're sentient. And so one of the most important things in a sanctuary, in the management style, is kind of treating the elephants as the individuals that they are, and making note of what they need, rather than having a system in place like, okay, this elephant's going to come in, we're going to introduce them to this one, all these different family groups. This is our protocol. A lot of times that doesn't work, because some elephants that might work great for, they might integrate really well into the sanctuary. Others might do really badly, you know, if they're fenced in at night, which they kind of need to be. Some might do really badly with certain individuals. So a big part of it is just allowing them to have the autonomy and self-determination to make their own decisions, do the things they want to do with their day, and also, you know, give them the ability to kind of create their own experience, because for so long they've had that taken away from them, and they've had people telling them where to go, when to go, what to eat, who they can socialize with. And, you know, that's a recipe for disaster in the elephants. And if you put them through basically a written out protocol for integration into a sanctuary, it's, you know, half the time, probably over half the time, isn't going to work for that specific elephant.
No, I think that's a really nice summary. And I think, you know, again, I feel like a lot of those things were really sort of beautifully portrayed in the film, and sort of examples of, you know, what the sort of individual needs and what, you know, what can happen when they're sort of given, you know, their autonomy. I'm still sort of tickled by, you know, like laughing at Noina when she got out and started running. You know, it's kind of, and it's a bit amazing to think about, you know, this sort of, you know, an elephant who's blind, but finally feels enough freedom that they're, you know, capable and willing to go out and sort of run across this field. So it's really sort of a beautiful moment that I think kind of underscores what you just explained. So if you allow me to put my professor hat on for a minute and ask you a little bit about, you know, specifically the study and the research that you conducted, and can you tell us a little bit about the design and what you found from that research?
Yeah, so basically I was living with these 11 elephants at Bless, and I would go out into the jungle with them every day. One of the great things was I was able to observe them in a variety of settings. so that I could kind of see if they were having kind of a reaction to something, if that was consistent, or if it was just based on, a certain stimulus that they were up against. And I also got to interview the mahouts, which are the elephant caregivers, and the sanctuary owner. So they were able to tell me kind of a history of every elephant that's come in, what their rescue was like, where they came from, what their lives were like before they, before whatever camp they rescued from, if they knew that information, how long it took them to integrate. I showed them my table of symptoms and asked, what of these do you think you saw when the elephant was rescued? And so I could get a pretty decent baseline of where they were at when they first came into the sanctuary and where they came from. Because like I said earlier, you really have to understand their past experiences and where they started. And in order for me to see if the management of Bless was ideal for their healing, I needed to know where they started when they were first rescued. So I was there for 3 months, and I was basically out observing the elephants all day, every day, and was able to take note of any behaviors I saw, any, when they would vocalize or the interactions they had with other elephants. So that really allowed me to look at the elephant as a whole, understand their past, understand where they're at now, and make some conclusions about their psychological health.
Excellent. No, that's really, and do you, is your feeling that that these, with these practices, that there's good evidence that these things can improve their health and help them sort of get, can they ever get sort of past the complex PTSD, or is there only a hope that they can, get marginally better?
Well, of all the elephants that I was interacting with, every single one of them was at a better place than they were when they were rescued. So every single one had less symptoms, or, some of them came in with no symptoms at all, which I mostly saw in logging elephants more so than tourism elephants. But 100% of them had better behaviors than when they came in. They were all less stressed based on the behaviors I was seeing. But none of the behaviors ever go away completely. So the elephants that I saw that had the most extreme behaviors, even if, it was only once a week or once a month, I would see them go back to some kind of coping. So like one of the elephants, she came actually from a really nice man that lived in the village just kind of across the street from the sanctuary. And he really took good care of her. He really loved her. But she was tied up on his front lawn for most of her life, and she was in her 70s, and she was, she's still alive. She's a really affectionate elephant with people. She really likes people because she's never really been poorly treated, but I would still every once in a while see her kind of swaying back and forth and showing that she was a little bit stressed out. And so I would just note that and say, okay, at this time of day or in this situation, a lot of times she's showing that she's stressed, which is probably making her feel the way she, when she was tied up on the front lawn of this guy's house. So, none of them ever completely 100% got rid of the symptoms that they came in with, but all of them improved.
Excellent. That's great. So I think that 3 of us will sort of join all together now and have a little bit of a joint discussion. And so I think I would like to start by, there's obviously there's a lot going on in the world right now, a lot for people to worry about. And I'm wondering if each of you could take a shot at explaining to us why should the average American or everyday citizen of the world care about elephants? And why don't you start, Ashley?
Yeah, in the making of the film, a lot of people said, especially stateside, they were like, elephants aren't indigenous to America. Why should I care about elephants? And the first, 1 or 2 times it was annoying. And then the more I heard that question, it became quite sad. And that was even more validation to do a story about one elephant, to pick that one elephant, or but to not need to do 3 elephants, to know that by solely telling the story of Noina, that was enough. Because in hopes of people seeing this film, they'll leave and have just a little bit more compassion for their fellow human, their fellow animal, their fellow bee, if it's on the ground, to not stamp it out, but to help. As we can see, the world is quite small and got even smaller with COVID, and we're all cooped up in our rooms, and the environment has a very fast way of acting back. And it's just hopefully people can have a little bit more respect for the way they treat Earth, and regard animals that don't necessarily speak the same verbal language that they do.
Excellent. Danielle, do you want to add anything?
Agree with that. Another thing I would say is, you know, from a One Health perspective, going back to my master's degree, and what I learned there was that, I mean, the elephants really keep the environment healthy throughout Thailand and throughout their native range. They eat so much throughout the day, and they disperse so much. You know what, they walk around, they disperse seeds, they keep the environment healthy. And if they weren't there, then who knows what, I mean, they're a keystone species. Who knows what would happen if they were taken out of their environment? And as we've seen this year, a lot can happen when we don't treat the environment well and when we don't respect wildlife. So I think that even if people think that the status of the Asian elephant doesn't impact them, it's likely that it does.
Yeah, I think I feel like there's a growing body of research looking at the sort of importance of, elephants as seed dispersers, which we never, when you hear seed dispersers, you're thinking of birds and, sort of small things. And they're fascinating. I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but there are a number of tree species whose seeds actually won't germinate unless they pass through an elephant. And I think if that's sort of not evidence of their critical role, in the environment, then I'm not sure what is.
I think that gets them the nickname, the Johnny Appleseed.
Yeah. So something a little bit more specifically, I think, we've used a couple of different terms and different ones are presented in the film, kind of talking about a camp and a trekking camp and a logging camp and a sanctuary. And I'm wondering if either or both of you could sort of spell out a little bit about those distinctions, and if there are fuzzy lines and kind of what those terms sort of come to mean, and maybe what they don't mean.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there is no governance over the word sanctuary in Thailand, and I will say broadly over Southeast Asia, though. So a lot of trekking camps, and especially since the film came out, began throwing the word sanctuary on their name, even though they were still using chains on the elephant, using bull hooks on the elephant, and most importantly, riding or using the elephant as a service animal. As you're doing your research, if we're, when and if you are lucky enough to travel, if you see photos or videos of riding elephants being used for service, bull hooks or chains being used, that is not a sanctuary. An elephant is still being used for the service of an animal. And I believe an organization called World Animal Protection has a list of humane sanctuaries that they have vetted. No contact sanctuaries where you can fully see elephants be elephants. Of course, Elephant Nature Park and Lex, all of Lex satellite sanctuaries are a part of that, as well as smaller sanctuaries and more remote, truly sanctuaries are on that list.
Yeah, I think that's so right, that you shouldn't just look for the term sanctuary, because anyone can use that term and they can choose their own name. Rather, you should look for the activities that you're being promised. And most of the time, if you're ever being promised anything from any kind of wildlife encounter, that's not going to be great, because that means that you're deciding. The humans are deciding and the animals aren't. So anywhere that says you'll definitely feed an elephant, you'll watch an elephant paint, you'll ride an elephant, if you're being promised these experiences, then it's not up to the elephant, it's up to you. And in that case, they're likely not being given the autonomy that they deserve.
And Danielle, you had shared on one of our pre-conversations where you went to a camp where you didn't know there was going to be riding, but what did you do to prove kind of where you're willing to spend your dollar, which is essentially what is the most kind of the top priority for those places. I never would have thought of this, and I thought this was, if you're in a situation like this, I just thought this was brilliant.
Yeah, I traveled up to Pai, which is in Thailand up north, and there's about 5 elephant camps there. They're not the worst of the worst because there's not a lot of tourism up there, so the elephants usually aren't really working all day. But I drove up there and I actually had like a backpack full of energy drinks, which everyone drinks in Thailand, all the Thai people drink. So I would drive up to one of the camps and sit down and give energy drinks out to the mahouts and the camp owner, and I would just sit with them and chat and ask them like if they could take the saddle off their elephant, if they could take the chain off, if they could just feed her or give her access to water. And a lot of them questioned me and they're like, you don't want to ride her? And I was like, no, I just want to look at her. Yeah. And a lot of them really asked me a lot of questions about it and were curious why.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that doing something as simple as that can kind of plant the seed in their mind that, you know, there are a lot of tourists who don't want to be hands-on with the elephants and who will actually pay us the same amount if we take the saddles off and have a more ethical model. So, I mean, anyone can do that. I don't speak that much Thai, so it's not like I'm, you know, out there speaking to them in Thai. I was managing, but anyone can do that if you find yourself somewhere that isn't great, even if, you know, it's somewhere that said no riding on the pamphlet, and then you get there and they're like, you want to ride her? All you have to say is no. I just want you to take the saddle off. The hour that I was going to pay you to ride her, I want you to give her an hour where she's free to do whatever she wants, and I want to watch her, and I'll pay you the same amount. And I mean, these people they're only doing it for money, not because they, you know, want to be exploiting their elephants. So they'll say yes.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear that, because it's the notion of planting those seeds. Like when Lek goes to a trekking camp to get to know them and know the owner and build this relationship for hopefully, you know, with Mr. Chayapong, it took years to gain his trust that there was another way for him. But she would tell me she would go visit camps and sit with the mahouts and show them her footage on her iPad of Elephant Nature Park or any one of her satellite humane sanctuaries. And they were like, wait, what? How, you know, in Thai, obviously, not wait, what? But, and they would see like how, oh my God, how is that elephant not attacking? How is that elephant not whipping his trunk back? How is that elephant not acting out? And she goes, because I teach it, you know, because I treat it with respect. I treat it with love, with the reverence that it deserves. And they couldn't fathom that, in the same way that Mr. Chayapong called his elephants kids, which we were shocked to know he used that word when we got the full transcription back of the footage, and that he never saw his kids play like that. You know, they traditionally, mahouts have become scared of elephants because of the line of trauma the elephants have had to endure, but planting the seeds that there is a new way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, that's excellent. I could listen to this all day.
Sure.
We're at the point we're going to start taking questions from the audience, and we had a bunch that were submitted in advance, so we're going to start with those. So the first one is, have there been any breeding attempts at the sanctuary?
Yes, there have been no breeding attempts at Elephant Nature Park. With breeding, it's normally forced breeding. And with that, some of the elephants you can see are results of forced breeding situations where a female elephant is restrained and a male elephant is, you know, essentially foists himself upon her, and the female elephant gets very hurt. Additionally, with forced breeding, what happens in certain situations, like certain zoos, that elephant will give birth and then immediately the baby will be taken away from that mother elephant. So there is no forced breeding or no breeding being done at Elephant Nature Park. Elephants do take 2 years to come to term with a pregnancy. They definitely beat our 9 months. So sometimes an elephant may come to Elephant Nature Park pregnant, and it'll take months for that elephant to actually give birth. And those are the incredibly rare and literally remarkable instances, which Lek has talked about, where she'll hear all these trumpets going off in the middle of the night, and an elephant will be giving birth, and they didn't even know that elephant was pregnant.
Yeah, I think we often forget that that there are people often forget that even though two arguments are made, right, that breeding in a sanctuary is important because it's natural, and it creates the sort of family structure that most animals are used to. So this is a dialogue that often happens with the great ape sanctuaries. But the flip side, of course, is that having more animals in the sanctuary is just creating more of a problem, more needs, more the need for more resources, especially when there's no prospect of those animals kind of returning to the wild, which is surely the case with the Asian elephants.
And psychologically, forced breeding does so much to female elephants that if they don't naturally get jiggy with it in their own elephant ways, it's a bit troubling for them.
So the next question is, I think there's a lot of interest in the scene with the cameraman hiding in the bathroom.
Yes.
So, could you please? So the question is, could you please elaborate on the situation that led to the elephant chasing the cameraman?
Yeah.
Was it possibly a jealous rage? How long did he have to stay out of sight? And did the elephant act aggressively towards him or any of the film crew again?
Yeah, well, that was the scene where and this happens with every elephant that's brought in, is all the herds come at varying times to meet the new family member, the new elephant. And that one particular elephant is an elephant named Fame, who is like Lek's daughter. And even though she's full elephant size, she still behaves like she's a baby elephant, which is still quite big. So Fame was jealous that Lek's attention was going to another lady. And that's what made her act out. The scene you saw, nothing was cut from that scene. So it was that brief burst. Our cameraman did hide in the cupboard, and then Lek used the hose, like you saw. No bull hooks, no nothing, a hose. And I believe bananas in totes were given, but that was it to say, calm down, cool down. None of the other, at that point, there was no other incidences with crew members being hurt from elephants. But after Fame kind of cooled down, we were kind of dispersing, and Lek was going back to her main kind of office area, and we see out in the field, Lek has planted, like, part of the construction is these kind of umbrellas, but really sturdy umbrellas ground into the, placed into the ground in cement. And Fame is still not having any of this new elephant. So she's like huffing and puffing around. She goes over to this cement, like drilled in canopy. She takes it with her trunk, rips it up, and just throws it. And you just see this, this is pure cement, just fling across the lawn. And Lek stands from her office, from the balcony, and she goes, Fame! In the loudest, deepest voice. I was like, how did that come from Lek? And you see Fame look at her, mope, and just come over. And Lek took this giant medicine ball, which is like this 50-pound ball that the elephants throw around. And she dragged it behind her because it's one of Fame's favorite toys, to kind of do time out. We're just going to go, I will spend time with you in this ball, but you can't destroy Elephant Nature Park anymore. And you just saw Lek, who's 4'11", carrying this 50-pound medicine ball, and Fame just like moping behind her because her mom was mad. It was so funny, and also like, wow, we are at an elephant sanctuary where elephants are truly doing elephant things.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good, I think it's a good reminder, and about the strength, how powerful these animals are. I think
yes.
It was amazing to me, this, the scene in the movie where the only way they could get Noina in the truck was by using another elephant. That was sort of the only thing strong enough to do that. And I think many in the audience may not appreciate how dangerous it is actually working around these animals, and a lot of the restrictions that are put in place with many zoos in the U.S. that now have sort of no contact and no opportunity for keepers to even go in with them. So speaking of Noina, do you have an update on her? Was a question from the audience.
Yes, yes, she has two friends that she hangs out with every day. She enjoys afternoon soaks in the river. Who doesn't? And lastly, she has gained 1,000 pounds. So for an elephant, she is proper elephant weight. So she's gained the COVID 1,000. Um, uh,
Better her than me, right?
yes. That being said, health-wise, unfortunately, Noina was partially blind. She did lose sight in her other eye. She does have a mahout that she trusts, who is with her day in and day out. They notice. I asked, like, how can you tell an elephant is going blind? How can you see that? And she said because she'll begin using her trunk like a guide stick, and when her trunk is trying to find parameters of things or walls, or they could begin to tell. So she's very well taken care of. She has a very special diet of food that she's still on, and yeah, she's made a life for herself out there.
So that's terrific. And I think sort of related to that, the next question is actually about what the sort of veterinary care is like at the Elephant Nature Park, and if there's sort of full-time care. And it's funny, I was going to mention that I think one of the veterinarians that I saw in the movie might be somebody that I've worked with actually when I was doing the training in Kanchanaburi. But so that's sort of a two-part question. One is about, is there a team of veterinarians that are kind of there full-time, or how does that work? And likewise, are there any people that are sort of conservationists or behaviorists that are doing anything to sort of study the elephant behavior at the park?
Absolutely. There is a full-time team of vet staff. As Danielle mentioned, all of these elephants are individuals with their own extremely specific health issues, dietary needs. Sometimes they don't have teeth. Sometimes they have a blockage in their throat. They all have their own special menu. There are people preparing food for all of those elephants, and they are there around the clock to care for them. Yes, Elephant Nature Park and Cambodia Wildlife Sanctuary, both under Lex Care and her other sanctuaries, do host veterinary groups which come to study the elephants completely humanely, participate in veterinary care, and can either be there for a week or for a much longer period of time studying those elephants.
Yeah, great. So another question from the audience is, what were your expectations going to Thailand, and were they met and exceeded? And this isn't addressed to either of you, so why don't you both answer? And Danielle, why don't you take a turn and give Ashley the chance to breathe?
Yeah. Well, I first went to Thailand when I was in college, and I actually went to Elephant Nature Park. And I don't know what my expectation was, but it was definitely exceeded. I was just so excited to see elephants. And that trip is really what kind of sparked my passion and made me want to work with elephants again. When I went back to Thailand last year, it was again exceeded because I was there for 3 months living with them. And that trip was really special because I was able to take on a lot more responsibility as a bigger part of the sanctuary. So I got to help with vet care. I obviously got to observe the elephants. I got to help with their foot care and the training that goes into being able to do voluntary medical care on the elephants. And yeah, it was amazing. I wish I was there right now.
Yeah, I think you're not alone in that regard. Ashley, what about you?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. In preparation, I think in the 2.5 years of waiting, I had written 18 different outlines for how this film could possibly be told, just in preparation for what I could be grabbing and looking to capture when we were boots on the ground there. And that's the both most exhilarating and most terrifying part of filmmaking, is the part where you're there. You have an idea of what you think you need to get on the day. And yes, sure, there are, of course, certain shots you need, but stepping back and letting the magic of the story that's unfolding in front of your eyes happen. That was the mud pit scene and the jungle walk that happened at Elephant Heaven with Mr. Chayapong. We had no idea that Lek was going to take 6 elephants without chains on a jungle walk, and it would end in this mud bath. And we call it our X factor in the edit, because we had absolutely no clue that a total reversal of character and point of view would literally happen in front of our eyes. Thanks to Lek, thanks to the spirit with which Lek works, and the love and the humanity and compassion. You know, it was all told through that point of view to our best ability, and keeping the cameras on and letting that unfold was truly remarkable.
Yeah, and I think it was appreciated that you took your part in the elephant bath as well by at least getting muddied, if not getting in the water.
Yes, you gotta dive in. I was so honored.
No, in all seriousness, it was an incredibly touching moment in the movie, I think, and it was apparent that how much you felt that as well. Okay, the next question we have is for you, Danielle. So what sparked your interest in elephant conservation, and do you have any plans to return to Thailand to continue research on Asian elephants?
So my first visit to Thailand, to Elephant Nature Park, is what sparked my interest in elephant conservation. Just being there and seeing all these amazing elephants that have been rescued, learning more about the plight of the Asian elephants, what they've been through, and having the chance to do some veterinary work, connect with some of the elephants, was really what inspired me. I hope that I can go back in the future. I would love to go back. I don't have any plans as of now, but I hope to continue working in elephant conservation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Danielle's not giving herself enough credit that she had something that was pretty close to lined up, I think, before the pandemic struck. So had some plans that were unfortunately sidetracked along the way. Okay, next question is for either of you. Is there a way that a circus or zoo could become a safe environment?
I think that a circus, less so, because the whole idea of circus is that an elephant is performing for you. There's no way to train an elephant to do the things they do in circuses in a humane way. There just isn't. No elephant wants to do that, and the things that elephants do in circuses are extremely hard on their bodies. And I saw that a lot when I was at Elephant Nature Park, actually, that a lot of the elephants had so many injuries, had dislocated hips, had, just endless injuries from circuses. Zoos, I think it depends on the zoo. I mean, like the sanctuaries, it depends. It also depends on what country it's in. I mean, the zoos in Thailand are horrifying. But, I do know some people who work with elephants in zoos in a couple other countries where, they can create a better environment for them. Obviously, to me, I don't think elephants belong in zoos. I don't think that it's the best environment for them. I think it's really, really challenging to give them what they need in a zoo environment. But obviously, again, just like sanctuaries, zoos, it's a sliding scale.
Mm-hmm.
If an elephant is alone in a zoo by themselves in a concrete enclosure, that's really bad. If they're, being rotated through different enclosures every day, if they have a whole herd that they can interact with and get along with, if they have, access to food and, that can be a better situation for them. And again, it depends on the elephant. Some elephants might be doing really well in an environment like the one I just described in, a better zoo. They might be really healthy, whereas some might struggle more with that. So, I mean, it really, as much as it's not probably the answer you want, it depends.
That's my favorite answer as a professor. Ashley, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I have to add is if you see an elephant in the wild, that's normally the last thing you're going to see. And I say that, with a dose of drama with it, but it is not, if you tried to approach a wild elephant in the wild and tried to get on it and ride it, the consequences would not be favorable. So if anything that falls under that, any performing or any paint or servitude, that wild animal needs to be broken for that service to happen. In terms of a zoo enclosure, I don't, in terms of location as well, some elephants are in climates that are extremely cold and they're still forced to stand on concrete. But again, if they're given a huge, I often think about us in quarantine, and especially when we were in a lockdown. Could we exist without foraging for our own food, having social interactions, being with each other, getting the kind of stimulation we need every day? It's the same as an elephant. They have that extremely developed brain to need that. Why they get such extreme PTSD, Danielle, I know in your report. So we can think of it in the same way. I know that's can be a bit anthropomorphizing, but with how highly developed these creatures are and their needs and dynamic relationships of family and friend structures, they need that interaction.
Yeah, I think related to that, kind of a follow-up question came in, Danielle, wondering if somebody spots the behaviors kind of as described, in the U.S., so presumably in a zoo or circus, is there any way to address that concern?
I think the best way that you can address any concern is to approach whoever is managing the elephant. I think that it's always best to act from a place of compassion rather than being accusatory, because you're not going to get any answers. So whether you're at a zoo, a circus, if you are talking to a keeper and you're like, your elephant is unhappy and you're terrible for keeping him this way, that's help you or them. Rather, I've gone to a zoo near me where I live and asked one of the people walking around if I could talk to the head keeper, and the head keeper came out and I talked to her for a while and asked her questions, because they know more about their elephant than you do. They know more about their past, their history, where these behaviors have come from. And I think the most important thing in that scenario is, if they're being really open with you and honest about what's going on with their elephant, then I think in a lot of cases, people are doing the best that they can. Like Ashley said, it's hard. I mean, imagine being kept in your house your whole life. There's never, most zookeepers know that it's not ideal, and they're happy to talk to you about that. In a circus, it's always going to be a little bit different because there's a less of a conservation mindset behind it. But I think just asking questions and challenging the perception that you have and the perception that they have, calling people out in a way that's helpful, that can actually get something done, is a great way to start moving forward in animal welfare.
Excellent. Yeah, I think so. So we're slightly into overtime. We've been given permission to go a little bit extra. I'm wondering if either of you has a quick anecdote or fun fact about elephants that the audience may not know that you would like to share.
Oh my gosh. I mean, for me, I learned something really interesting, was that elephants are right-trunked or left-trunked in the same way we are right-handed and left-handed. And you can tell by the stain on an elephant's trunk which side they favor to grab, the stain of green, which side they favor to grab the grass or the trees to eat. Additionally, Danielle, I know we were talking about this and it just lit us both up, was how kind of picky eaters they can be at some time. And I felt so silly thinking, the elephant, they just eat a lot. No, they are very selective of what they want to eat. I was on a recent trip to Africa to work on another project with elephants. I watched these wild elephants take grass. And of course, grass is going to have dirt on it. They sifted the grass so delicately in their trunks to shake out all the dirt and then ate the grass. And I'm like, of course, I wouldn't want a mouth full of dirt, but that was just done so beautifully and delicately. Those were two instances, but especially the right-handed and left-handed. I was blown away.
Yeah, I think it's incredible to see how picky they are. When I was at Bless, we would do this type of target training, which is all positive reinforcement, to train them to present different parts of their bodies to get medical care, so that if they're ever in a really bad situation, they know what to do and it's less stressful for them. And we usually would use apples because most of the elephants like apples, and there were no apples to be found in the country of Thailand. We couldn't find them. We went to so many grocery stores, we couldn't find any. So we're like, okay, what do we have? So I ran down to the kitchen where we had all the food for all the other animals that we had. And I was like, carrots, we have carrots. And so Catherine, who's the head of the sanctuary, was like, okay, let's try it. And so we went out on a walk with the elephants. They were out in the jungle grazing. And I had in my pockets, not even in a backpack, just my pockets were stuffed full of chunks of carrots.
Oh.
And every time we'd find an elephant, I'd go up to the mahout and I would hand them a piece of carrot. And every time they're like, what do you want me to do with this? And I'm like, feed it to the elephant. And they're like, she's not going to eat this. I was like, please try. And so I think 9 out of 11 of the elephants refused the carrot. They would pick it up, they would like smell it, and they would put it on the ground. Some of them would even step on it, like to tell me, I am not eating your carrot. One of them did eat the carrot. So then the next morning, we started to do some foot care on her to try to attempt this. And the second we had her in a protected contact situation, she was in like the quarantine house that we have, so that it's safer for us and for her. I asked her for her foot and I offered her a carrot and she was like, I'm not eating that. Like, she was like, oh, now that we're in a training situation, no, not eating that carrot.
That is so funny.
We had to wait a few weeks until we could find apples.
No.
We couldn't do any training, any medical care. They would not eat the carrots. So every week when we would go to the market, we were like, do you guys have watermelons, like pumpkins, yeah. And they're like, no. So there was no medical care for a few weeks.
I have to say, when they drop food out of their mouth, it's for real. It's that obvious. They do not like it. I'm notoriously, for all my friends, a horrible cook. But in Thailand, you know, like, it's like, here, help us make, you know, we're doing something where I helped cook and like made these turmeric balls. And I remember walking over to Noi Na, who'd like lived 73, years in the worst conditions. And I'm like, made all these turmeric balls for her. I'm so excited to present them and I bring them up to her. And I give her one turmeric ball that I had made. And she took it in her trunk and just sifted through it, and just chunks of it just fell on the ground. I was like, I am that bad of a cook that I cannot even cook for an elephant. So
yeah, a lot of times sanctuaries will also use those balls with like sticky rice to put medication in, to put pills in. Mm-hmm. And some of the elephants are totally fine and they'll take it because they like them. But some of the elephants that I worked with would take the ball of rice and would open it up and pick all the pills out and throw the pills on the ground and then eat the rice.
So I'm afraid that we are out of time. It was nice to end on that very, very funny note. I wanted to, since Ashley didn't get to mention it, I think we wanted to just put in a plug for the Elephant Chronicles, is the project that you're working on that's coming up. Is that correct, Ashley?
Yes, I'm doing a project called Elephant Chronicles, which is structured to be a television series. Hopefully, when quarantine lifts and the pandemic, there's a solution to it, covering the matriarchal lives of elephants throughout the globe. Hopefully, told by a team of directors, writers, producers that are all female, in order to capture that female perspective and capture that female lens of what it is to be a matriarchal society. So that's the project I've been working on as a follow-up to continue telling these stories of conservation globally.
That's great. We'll all be looking forward to that. So I think this was really terrific. This was a lot of fun. I'm sad that we didn't get to talk about bees and peppers and a lot of the other things that we talked about in preparation for this. So I want to thanks to Ashley and Danielle. This is a really sort of fascinating and hopefully educational conversation for everybody. And thanks to everyone in the audience for taking the time to watch the film and join us today and send in some great questions. We're really appreciative of you doing that. So you'll all receive an email in the next couple of days with a link to a small, brief 2-minute survey, which we hope that you'll all complete. And if you're so inclined, if you would consider making a gift to the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine, that plays a vital role in the health and well-being of animals and humans in the region, as well as inspiring and preparing future leaders in veterinary medicine research and conservation. That's always appreciated. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. Please have the rest of a wonderful evening, or rest of your day if you happen to be in Hawaii, for example. Please take care of yourselves, and hopefully we will get through this this time, and I'll be able to help do our part for conservation. So thank you, and good night.
Thank you all so much. It's such
Thank
an
you.
honor. Thank you.